We're all familiar with the telltale signs of ghost hauntings like mysterious, unexplained sounds and disembodied voices. But what about when a spirit takes a more unique approach? This was the experience of a British family in the early 20th century. So today, let's discuss the facts and fiction behind the peculiar case of Gef the Talking Mongoose. This is Red Web. Welcome back, Task Force, to another episode of Red Web, the podcast all about unsolved mysteries, true crime, and of course, the supernatural. I'm your resident mystery enthusiast, Trevor Collins. Joining me, hearing this case for the very first time, Alfredo Diaz.
You think it'd be April Fool's, but it's not. We're closing in on October.
Yep.
Interesting. Very interesting. This one, I think, probably for the first time has really thrown me.
We got a talking mongoose named Gef. I mean, there's not much to go off of there, huh?
There's not too much to go off of. I don't quite know where this is going.
Right. It's an interesting case for sure.
I mean, already I'm intrigued.
Yeah. I feel like April Fool's is definitely a good wrapper for this type of thing, but it is one of the theories we're going to explore. But Gef the Talking Mongoose has been one of those topics that we've talked about adding to the kind of programming schedule and then pulling it off and not sure what to do with it. But then when we finally sat down and did the research and pulled it all together, there are some really interesting supernatural angles to talk about as far as like the story is concerned. And then a few angles for the theory. It's a fun one. It's definitely a fun ghost one rather than a terrifying, I'm deeply unsettled kind of supernatural story.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
A fun ghost one.
We got a fun ghost like a Casper out here.
Yeah, it's a fun ghost. Hanging out, fun ghost.
But before we dive in, as always, huge shout out to our task force members supporting us over at patreon.com/redweb. We've talked about this all the time. It is the fuel to our jets, to our, well, I'll be honest, we don't put it in our jet. We put it on our flaming bird, which is the Phoenix. And it keeps us shining bright. Anyway, it is the number one way to support us now that we're independent. Patreon.com/redweb is where you get our bonus show, Movie Club. You know we love movies, so we talk all about horror films. Fredo is hosting that one, and we each kind of pick a film and go through those. You get this podcast ad-free. We have bonus content. I'm super stoked for one that we just put out a few weeks ago, which is the Mothman commercial that we never fully released.
Oh, yeah.
Where you're getting pulled up into the ceiling. That one has me cackling every time I watch it. Just from you getting abducted was great. But yeah, we have peeks behind the scenes, things like that, Discord events, all sorts of things to thank you and give you more for supporting us directly. And of course, store.redwebpod.com. We have lots of merch going on there. More to come in the coming months, trying to plan some more things. But I want to give some shout outs to some of the task force members. We have Ashley Lucy, Presley McDade, and of course we have our monthly squonk shout outs, Clint from PS3, Sabrina Hall, and Gavin Day, to name a few. But with that said, let's dive into Gef the Talking Mongoose and his interesting story. So James and Margaret Irving were a married couple, and they originally lived in Liverpool, England. It's my terrible Liverpool accent. Sorry, Paul McCartney and the rest. But then they decided to move to a farmhouse known as Dúrlais Cashin in 1917. This farmhouse is secluded. It was near a small town named Dalby on the Isle of Man. And if you're unfamiliar with this, Fredo, the Isle of Man is a relatively small island given the surroundings, but it's between Great Britain and Ireland. So you're kind of just out there.
Is the only way on and off the island via boat?
Yeah.
Yeah, why would you do that?
Via boat with a haunted captain who's seen too many things. And he only travels in a storm, too.
Yeah, and he's got a gyrating eye. He's got an oscillating eye.
He's got an oscillating eye and a gyrating something else.
Yeah.
That's how he stays stable on the high seas.
Why would you just want to stick yourself out there? That just seems like you're putting yourself into a corner, heaven forbid something happen.
It's a beautiful place, but it is out there for sure.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to be boxed in like that.
Yeah. Now, as I come to understand it, before we get into the meat of this story, Dúrlais Cashin has been known to have a spiritual animal around it. There are old stories that predate this family coming here That I understand. It's kind of through the grapevine, as it were. But there are old stories of something supernatural being there. Not too much more beyond that, other than there being a presence. And so maybe that's part of fuel for this story, or maybe it's fuel for the truth here. But I have heard from locals who travel there periodically to kind of look at the land that is the case. Kind of like a folk story or something like that, urban legend.
I feel like everywhere in any place in the world, there's always an urban legend. People want to be like, oh, let me tell you the story about this place.
Yeah.
How this place is haunted.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
That's why I only shop from Pottery Barn. Nothing's haunted from Pottery Barn.
No, unless
there's no character, there's no story.
Unless you find one that's just on its own and it's different than the others.
A Pottery Barn on a stormy island.
Yeah.
No, we don't go to that one.
Yeah, that one sells all kinds of cursed goods. Oh, that reminds me. My next movie club recommendation is going to be a movie called Oddity that came out recently. It looked really good. Been getting like 94% rating.
I've never heard of. Wait, have I? Hold on. Googling.
Don't look it up. Don't look it up.
Okay, not Googling.
Don't look it up. Just we'll watch it eventually. It's a little sneak peek for the future.
Okay. I also need you to know that's what I do when I Google. I just call it out. Googling. It's really awkward in the public restroom. Well, here's the thing. Coming back to your everything's got a story, everything's got a haunting. I think you're right. I had to Google it. Googling. Because there's been so many people over the tens of thousands of years that we've been around. Homo erectus has been erect, right? And don't giggle, it's science. And on estimates, as of 2022, 109 billion humans have come and gone. 94% of all humans that have ever lived are obviously dead. And so I feel like we got a real crowded planet when it comes to ghosts. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I feel like every square inch is claimed as some kind of haunted spot.
What's that meme? There's a meme that's like, no matter what you're doing, you're at least in contact with 7 ghost butts at any given time.
The butts of the ghosts?
Who knows how that, maybe they're shy. They face away from you.
Damn.
Yeah.
You can only tell them by their cheeks.
Oh, you get familiar with them that way?
Yeah.
Well, if that's the case, this far out farm has at least got, a handful of ghosts kicking around,
I would think so. A farm in the middle of nowhere on an island that's abandoned, like someone went there.
I like that you added abandoned.
Yeah, it's not really abandoned. I just kind of added that. At some point it was abandoned and then someone went there and they claimed it or something.
We got a huge Isle of Man listenership here, so show some respect.
It just sounds so isolated.
It's pretty isolated. It's out there. So the family moves to this island, beautiful Dorlish Cashin. It's been around the block, it's historic. And they have a young daughter, maybe a year or two after moving in. Her name is Vora. And the family lived peacefully at their new abode for about 14 years until Vora grew up into her kind of tween era, preteen era. She was about 12 or 13 years old. This would now take us to September of 1931, and so far everything has been fine until around here, where the family begins hearing scratching and rustlings behind their walls. And so of course they're thinking, well, maybe this is a rodent. We are out here in a farm, there's wildlife, etc. But soon these scratches and rustlings turned to growls and screeches that would become louder and louder, more prominent, and would echo through the halls and down the walls and everything. And so they said, okay, well, maybe this is still a rodent, maybe a family of rodents, what have you. They tried to trap it. Various techniques just didn't work out, and whatever was causing the noise continued on. And James decided to try to scare the thing. He decided to growl back at it, maybe assert some dominance, I don't know. Maybe this is a pack animal. But the entity seemed to take joy in imitating his sounds. So as soon as he would kind of growl, it would growl back. And James would then try to make different noises to scare the creature, and he found that it just mimicked him again and again, despite the sounds he made. James later describes the sounds coming from this creature, this entity, as the sounds of a baby, quote, gurgling. And this is according to the book Haunted People. But as the story goes, through this intelligent mimicking, James was then able to teach this entity to speak.
Yeah, see, that's just all that, too much.
Mm-hmm.
Too much.
They say don't respond to the demon, and now you're teaching it.
You're teaching it, you're learning. Not only, here's the thing, okay?
Yeah.
If you want to go out there and be an idiot when it comes to ghosts and spirits and stuff like that, that's cool. Don't do it at the expense of the human race. They'll go out there and start teaching it things that will, essentially set it down this path of potentially mass destruction. Because that's what I feel like is happening.
You're saying we don't need to worry about AI scooping up all this data and information and becoming self-aware. We need to worry about spirits. There are about 109 billion spirits that are ready to become intelligent.
Yeah.
And come after us.
Yes. Because once they start getting, we talked about this a lot. The digital age, I'm sure they'll find a way. All the TikTokers will, they'll pass away at some point in time, and then some of them might be a ghost. And then from there, it's like, I don't know, they're going to want to affect the digital stuff.
I know. They're going to be teaching the orange justice to the 31st century.
Oh, Lord.
So this is where the talking comes from the name, right? This entity is call returning, responding to his growls by growling in return. And all the while, it seems that James has been making a lot of diary notes about this, writing a lot of letters. Like there's copious amounts of that, and we'll talk about those in a bit. But he's kind of documenting everything he's experiencing. Now, once this entity was able to talk, it then revealed that it was, quote, a ghost in the form of a mongoose. And it was named Gef, G-E-F. And it was born on June 7th, 1852 in New Delhi, India, of all places. I mean, that is the proper location for the mongoose kind of habitat. It would be kind of through the South Asian band up into the Middle East a little bit, and then through Africa. But suffice to say, the UK is not its natural habitat, a mongoose.
I didn't think it would be. Also, I've now come to realize it actually is a mongoose we're talking about, not a person named Goose or something like that, or
oh, gotcha.
Person named like it's an actual mongoose.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It says it's a ghost in the form of a mongoose named Gef, born in India in 1852. It's very interesting. We don't get an answer as to why it takes the form of a mongoose.
Right. But also, now we get character selection and afterlife. We have to choose what we want to be, what we want to come back as, and the name and everything. Like, it's interesting of a theory.
It is interesting. Even the concept of being able to speak back and forth with a supernatural entity.
Right.
Now, Gef claims to have understood multiple languages. Even before being able to speak himself, those languages included English, Hindustani, Flemish, Manx, Russian, Hebrew, Italian, Welsh, and Arabic. So basically saying I could understand these things. If they were spoken around me, I would know what they would say, but I couldn't myself speak them, not until Father James here was able to, I guess, cross that barrier for Gef, help teach him. Now, for whatever reason, the Irvings kind of accepted Gef as a member of the family, didn't scare them away, didn't perturb them. But it is worth noting that much of the information, by the way, we have about Gef comes from the extensive letters and diaries that I was talking about James having written. In fact, in 2010, writer Christopher Joseph, who is considered a Gef expert, if there could be one, studied these letters and diaries in an archive at the University of London. And as such, he's made a lot of the quotes and details available to the public. And more on his archive and why these letters were kept later on, kind of as we discuss the veracity, the theories angle of this whole story. Mm-hmm. But it is interesting that a lot of these were kept at the University of London to be, I guess, for the long haul, you know?
Yeah, I mean, why not? Document things. That's always important. Things lost to time. You hate to see that. I
would hate for this to be the first substantial real evidence of a ghost, and we go, nah, let's just throw this out because it's a mongoose.
Yeah, because we know the ins and outs and the rules of the afterlife.
Mm-hmm. So, like I said, the family kind of took him in as a member of the family, and Gef supposedly helped around the house, but he was also known to be mischievous and played tricks on people. For example, he would steal bacon and sausages and was said to ride the bus. In fact, the driver of the bus told Nandor Fodor, who we'll talk more about later, but they're a researcher who later came to investigate. This is what the driver said, quote, "Yes, I am the man whose dinner was pinched," he said. "The dinner was 6 sandwiches in a brown paper parcel. The paper was slit open as if by a knife or sharp claws. The sandwiches were missing. I should like to get my hands on that, Gef," he said, with clenched fists as he jumped back on his bus.
This is a very active little ghost mongoose.
Yeah.
Running around. It seems like it's friendly, so that's nice.
Yeah, a little prankster energy, but nothing like sinister.
I still would never trust that.
No, I mean, that's how they get in. But here's the thing, like, what's interesting is that we have a bus driver from the area who now has an experience with this, and I guess it's kind of I want to lay the groundwork as we go into the theories and talk. Is this fact or fiction? Is this real, or is this a hoax, or is this a prank? The fact that like somebody else had an experience like this, it necessitates the conversation of, well, are they also faking it? If they're not, who then perpetrated this sandwich theft? And if that isn't what happened, then how did this happen, like with the bus driver?
Right.
But coming back to his trickery ways, his mischievous ways, Gef teased the family once, yelling at James as he read the newspaper, quote, "Read it out, you fat-headed gnome." When did he learn those words?
Yeah, what? How's he learning all the? What is this?
Interesting. And then in the notes here, Jillian earmarked this as similar to a cat, but Gef also left dead rabbits for the Irvings to find. Gef thinking, well, you can't hunt on your own. Let me go scoop up a couple of rabbits and leave them on your doorstep here.
Yeah, act just like a cat.
Mm-hmm. And another kind of mischievous thing he was said to have done was throwing stones at people he disliked. And I'm very curious if there was any correlation between these people that Gef didn't like and people that maybe this family didn't like, if there's anything there. But it was also said that sometimes Gef was known to urinate through cracks in the walls. And I just gotta say, if this was a prank, who's the person peeing through all these cracks in the wall on people? It's a question we gotta ask.
Yeah, man. The diabolical right there.
That's truly sinister. But like, yeah, I mean, like, if that's where we're going, I can't help but want to say, well, all right, we might have something supernatural on our hands, but I've never heard of a ghost that can pee. And if this is a prank down the road, if that's what we're going to talk about, who's been peeing on these people?
Who's been given the golden shower?
Right. Dang, the hose down. All right, so the family claimed that Gef even followed them when they would leave the house. Though he would kind of stay out of sight, it was just something that he would kind of watch over them or maybe eavesdrop. For example, on one occasion, John left the house with a friend of his. They were going on a walk, and when they returned back home to Dorlish-Cashin, they were surprised to find out that Margaret already knew what they had been talking about, because apparently Gef had followed along and got back to the house to report on these, I don't know, the goss, the hot tea that they might have been talking about. And so that's really interesting to me, is that you have a third party here now, outside of the family, having this experience where they're like, oh wait, okay, so you knew what we were talking about even though we were out there, so something must have shared this information.
Yeah, now we got information leaks.
Yeah.
This is a very vivid story.
It's very vivid, 100%.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of ghost stories that just keep rolling out the deets.
Right. Like, we're getting more and more info as we go.
Yeah, absolutely. What's interesting is that sometimes Gef would insult the Irvings, as we kind of heard earlier. Whether it's playful or not, we don't know, but it was also said that he would threaten them to haunt them forever, which is fascinating. I'm curious now if he was part of the estate, because it took about 14 years of being there before they experienced Gef whatsoever. But if he's threatening to haunt them forever, did you come with the house, or did you just find us out here on this island? I don't know.
Yeah, you never know too. And then if the reverse side too is if you leave, a lot of the way they say is it just latches onto you and then it follows you everywhere. So you're kind of screwed.
I mean, that's the thing, is once you start to experience something that you can't fully explain, I feel like it makes a very fascinating story. But if I'm just putting myself in the saddle, if I'm seeing something out of the corner of my eye, I'm not paying it heed. I'm making sure I think about my doors being locked. I'm making sure I think about all the pragmatic things.
Mm-hmm.
But just on the off chance that it is something that I can't explain from the other side, I'm not feeding into it, because I don't want it latching on. I don't want it elevating what it's up to. And I don't want it to be where it doesn't matter. You've got a demonic possession on your hands, and no matter where you go, I'm coming.
That's what I'm saying. The people that say they're qualified, it's hard to believe that they're qualified.
Right.
Let alone you're just a random person.
If you buy my 10-volume novel set,
Yeah.
it will show you how qualified I am.
Step 1 is free. The next 9 steps
always
are multiple payments.
Right, now sign here. I get the rights to your thing. Again, I'm not necessarily a believer. I'm a big skeptic out here. I want to believe. I want there to be a talking mongoose, but at the same time, there will be bumpers on my bowling alley. There's gonna be cautionary steps. I'm not indulging in this freakazoid mongoose who's threatening to haunt me forever.
Right.
I'm I got my insight, I got my data, growling in the walls, I'm out. That's where it would have stopped. But over the years, many people have come and gone from this house, and only a few of them claim to have actually seen Gef, including Vora, the daughter, who said that he was kind of like a yellowish rat with a bushy tail, which would be an accurate description of your run-of-the-mill mongoose. I'm very curious if she had access to that information, if she's ever heard or seen or learned of a mongoose, or if, how that information came to pass, because that would be interesting to look into. Like, how do you know what a mongoose looks like as like a 12 or 13-year-old who might not have experienced one?
Yeah, it's not a typical animal that you would see in a children's book,
Mm-hmm. But with the further description of Gef, we really don't have a whole lot. There's some images that I'm going to show you later, but I want Gef to kind of describe himself. So he was said to have described his own strange appearance like this, quote, and this is from Gef, supposedly, quote, "I am a freak. I have hands and I have feet. And if you saw me, you'd faint, you'd be petrified, mummified, turned into stone or a pillar of salt," end quote. And in a letter, James claimed the entire family had seen Gef at some point, though interestingly, undoubtedly none of them turned to stone or salt. But it did pique my interest reading this quote, because again, I'm approaching this from a let's dissect as we move, as we kind of assess the story here.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm seeing the pillar of salt angle. And obviously that's kind of like a reference to the looking taboo motif that is throughout many stories, and essentially the biblical story of Sodom in the book of Genesis. Like, don't look back, don't look at the city, or you'll be punished. The wife looks back, looks at the city being punished by God, and she herself turns into a pillar of salt, right?
Oh.
And so basically, like, there's a biblical reference here. So I was really curious if this is coming as a projection from the family. It would start to make a lot more sense if they were heavily religious in some way, because we've seen that a lot in paranormal, supernatural cases where there are spirits.
Yes.
But in the end, word spread about this Gef the Talking Mongoose, and the family started receiving many inquiries for Gef. But again, not a lot of people saw it, but it definitely beget a lot of visitors who would come to Dorlish Cache-In to see this talking mongoose, including, of course, investigators. People that wanted to get to the bottom of this. Is this real, or do we just have another hoax on our hands?
Yeah, I mean, as a, spiritual investigator, you gotta go.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure it's not the weirdest ghost reporting that they've ever had,
Might be one of the most vivid.
Right, I would say so. It's just funny to see like professionals far and wide being like, okay, let me see, like, let me take a look at this mongoose,
Oh, mongoose.
Mongoose.
Excellent.
Because, you never want to, I mean, look, let's be honest. What else are they going to do? Right? What? It's not like they're getting reports, I wouldn't think, every single day that are worth chasing down.
Mm-hmm.
And so they probably have an opportunity or two to go look for some stuff. And this is one of the wilder stories. So here we are.
Absolutely. And we're also way back. I mean, regardless of the time frame and the arrival of electricity in houses, that aside, I mean, this house was so remote. They didn't have running water. They didn't have electricity. So there's a lot of modern reasons that you might hear things or might experience something, whether it be electromagnetic frequencies playing with your brain, whether it be a knocking pipe. What's fascinating to me is that we have such a vivid case before all of that, at least in this house. This episode of Red Web is sponsored by BetterHelp. Task Force, let me ask you a question. What's something you love to learn, aside from mysteries, of course? Because as an adult, I need to ask you, do you make time to learn new things as often as you like, or was that lost in your childhood? All that magic of learning, because therapy can help you reconnect with that sense of wonder, because that back to school era all the kids go through, well, that can come at any age, baby. I'm a lifelong learner. I love learning. But here's the thing. Therapy can be very daunting for a lot of people. They don't know where to look. They don't know how to start. And that's what I appreciate about BetterHelp. It is a great starting point to cross that bridge and not overwhelm yourself. I was overwhelmed, so I would always just give up. I don't know where to look. But BetterHelp offers a nice and easy service that's convenient for you, and they find you the right person, and that's the most important part, is finding the right person. They make that easy. And if you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, and it's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. All you have to do is fill out a brief questionnaire. You're going to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists, like I said, at any time for no additional charge. Rediscover your curiosity with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/redweb today to get 10% off your first month. Again, that's BetterHelp, HELP.com/redweb. This episode of Red Web is also sponsored by you. I call this the PBS org situation of it all. But listen, Task Force, you guys support this show fundamentally, whether it be through patreon.com/redweb, where you get the bonus podcast known as Movie Club, where we talk about spooky movies from good to bad. I mean, we cover the spectrum, and that is hosted by Fredo, and we all kind of bring a movie to the table. It's a wonderful time. You also get this podcast ad-free, so you don't have to hear me babble on about our good partners out in the world. You can just get that direct injection of mystery right to those veins, boost your knowledge, get buff on that stuff. But also, seriously, it is the number one way to support us. We also have bonus content every month, Discord events, all sorts of goodness. Go check out patreon.com/redweb. But if you want to wear us and represent us out in the world, we have maximalist and minimalist merch at store.redwebpod.com. It's another way to support us, if not just the free way. As I always say, review us, share us with your friends and family, rate us 5 stars, whatever that looks like. Spending your time supporting us means the world. So thank you so much. Again, we're sponsored by you guys, and it means the world. So thank you very much. So researchers began going out and doing investigations, and in fact, we have researcher Harry Price. He had a correspondent who informed him about Gef, so Price then visited the Isle of Man in July of 1935. This would be now about 4 years of Gef activity, and this is actually how and why the James Irving letters ended up being archived, as they now reside in Price's archive at the University of London. So I initially was like, why are these being archived of all things? Well, it's because Price took a keen interest in them, and he himself archived them in his own personal archive. And in their later book, The Haunting of Cashin's Gap, Price and his assistant wrote that they kept an open mind about Gef. They wanted to see what could happen if they would experience anything, but they themselves never saw anything. I never saw Gef.
Look, Jeff's very particular, you know? It's like dogs. Not all dogs want to be approached.
That's true. Maybe just like a dog, Gef could smell it on you, your fear, right? You're going in, you're trying to keep a level mind about the supernatural, but you're actually dead afraid.
Yeah, your disbelief too.
True.
I do like their angle, because that's the angle that we kind of live by, right? Where we want to believe. Some of us want it to be more real than others, but in a sense, we all want it to be real.
Yeah, we all really want it to be real.
Yeah, all of us equally. And so I do like that. I do appreciate that, because that's how we go into episodes and ghost hunts and everything, is thinking like, okay, like I want it to be real. Like give me something I can like chew on here.
Absolutely. And anything that comes our way, we're going to try to explain. We're going to try to understand. And then what happens at the bottom of all that, the remainder of the things we can't explain are just kind of, well, that's interesting. I mean, I don't know how to explain this part. Like nothing concludes the answer, right? Nothing, obviously we don't have proof of the supernatural anywhere, but it's that stuff that you can't explain. I think that makes this kind of stuff so enticing.
What would it take for you to be like, okay, yeah, I'm sold? How extreme or not extreme would it take for you?
Oh man, it would be very situational. You know, someone lifts up in the air, I'm looking for those fishing lines, you know, and I'm thinking like, what's the tensile strength of this to lift up a grown person? You know, but if I start feeling something, like I've felt pokes before, but then I'm like, but is that just my muscle twitch? You know, like that can happen.
Yeah, or the atmosphere.
But I think like, I don't know, man. I would have to be dead alone, and then I'd have to like hear something, or I'd have to see something. Okay. And I had to like know that I was alone, because as much as I trust you guys, if we're out there and something happens, I might be inclined, like something that we fully can't explain, I might be like, you sure you're not pranking me? Are you sure you didn't set something up?
I think that's fair. I think we'd all be asking that question too. I think I'd have to actually see something floating.
If something left a mark, you know, like a small scratch, or like, I don't know, something changed in the environment, like physically, that would get me closer.
Okay.
Now, this comes back to Harry Price. He comes here with his assistant or his correspondent. They're keeping an open mind, but they never saw him. And it is said that James actually gave Price some of Gef's hair. We've seen this before in Bigfoot sightings, in all sorts of like cryptid sightings. We have hair of the Yeti. Let's analyze it. And they actually did. They went back to some scientists and they identified it as belonging to a dog. Most likely, the family dog Mona would be the probable candidate. Price also took footprints in a putty that was supposedly from Gef, but scientists could not identify the animal that made these. And we actually have photos of the imprints from those supposed footprints there for you.
Oh, okay.
As always, those will be in our video version on YouTube as well as on social media at RedWebPod.
Those are all supposed to be Jeff's?
Those are supposed to be little mongooses, but you see that there's like a wide array of sizes and shape.
It's all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
Like one looks like it's like a lion's paw to the top right. The other one looks like some kind of gargoyle creature type of print. The bottom ones are so tiny. Like, oh man, like a fifth of the size even.
What's interesting to me is that usually when you see like cryptid impressions or whatever, they pour like a liquid plaster into the footprint or whatever. And so what you would have is a negative, i.e. the footprint is bulging out of the clay.
Oh, yeah.
Because you're printing it off the ground. You could then take a negative of that print and then have it look like an actual print. But what's interesting is that these are actual negative indentations in the clay, which makes me think that James just pulled up a chunk of clay, pounded his hand in, and then poked with his thumb to make these 4 digits, you know? Like,
yeah.
Okay, so let's describe these things. What are you seeing in each of these prints?
Like I said, that top one looks like a lion made it. The top left looks like a gargoyle.
Mm-hmm.
The bottom ones are hard to describe. I don't know. Like the bottom one would look like it'd be kind of like a Pixar character or something like that.
Yeah.
Where it's like a crab with a round shell or something. And you got the little leggies. And the right one, the bottom right, just looks mangled. Maybe like kind of baby feet or something.
I was going to say baby feet, or someone was chewing on that clay.
Yeah.
Like teeth marks. That bottom middle one's interesting because it has a similar shape to the top one that you said looks like a lion's paw, but it's missing a toe. It has 3.
It does have 3, but it's also so much smaller.
And here's the thing is that it's clear that this is an impression directly in the clay because of how steep and detailed this print is. But also, if it was this size, you know, it looks to be maybe a quarter or a third of the size of the one above it. How is the imprint so deep if it was that light of a creature, right? Like, I don't know if the clay was that soft. All I'm trying to say is it feels a little too deep, a little too vivid. Why is it directly into the clay unless he said, hey, Jeff, stick your paws on my clay so I can show that you're real? Like, it's definitely not definitive, and there's 4 totally different prints across these 4.
Yeah, they're all vastly different.
Mm-hmm. None of them even look like a dog print, for what it's worth. But if a dog stepped on this, one might be that size, that bottom middle one might be the size of a dog print. But again, a dog's print wouldn't be that, like, there's like peaks of clay up between the paw pad and the digit pad, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. Yeah.
It wouldn't look like that.
No.
Anyway, I'm playing my hand pretty early because it is a sillier one. I think it's a fascinating story, but I do think there are many layers of, I'm not sure if I'm going for it on this story.
I think the thing is they went really elaborate. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I think the key is to keep it kind of vague. Keep people guessing.
Right.
Let them fill in the blanks. But it feel like they're just like, we got the complete backstory on Jeff. Let me tell you. We got the lore. We got all the post-credit scenes on this creature. We got everything there is to know.
I was going to say, this is like George R.R. Martin wrote this story about this talking mongoose.
Pages and pages of just descriptions of the scene and the tables and the food.
And it's exactly that detail that gets us looking so close. You know what I mean? You give us a lot to chew on. I'm going to start eating.
That's exactly.
But here's the thing. Price himself, after his journey there, wrote that Jeff was most likely a hoax due to the lack of evidence. So immediately they're on our same footing. This then leads us to the person I had identified before, but only a few years later. February 1937, Nandor Fodor, a parapsychologist, went to see Jeff. Now, parapsychology is something we've talked about a few times on this show. It's essentially the study of the paranormal and psychic phenomenon in general, such as telekinesis, the idea of clairvoyance, things like that, though Fodor himself referred to this work as psychical research. Now, through this lens, a lot of the theories come through that say kind of, you know, we're not talking fully moving things with your mind or speaking mind to mind. That's not necessarily the angle that Fodor is taking here. What he's kind of after is sometimes these types of phenomena, whether it's a talking mongoose or something else, might have actually psychological causes. They start from within and manifest outward, such as in the case of the Belmez faces, a very fascinating case that we talked about quite a while ago, but parapsychologists believe that this story of the Belmez faces, these ghostly faces appearing on the floor throughout this home of a Spanish family, were not caused by ghosts appearing and haunting the family, despite their repeated appearance, no matter what they did to the house, but instead that it was caused by one of the residents' emotions, that they were feeling a type of way, that they were feeling something, and because of that feeling, they were then projecting the image of a face, a pattern onto the floor.
Oh.
I think there's a lot to that. You know, if you're in a certain psychological mood or mode or what have you, you can definitely start to, like, let's just take a common example, a pessimist and an optimist. They're going to see the same things in life completely differently. So one factual event can be interpreted and received as two different worlds.
That's true.
And so the angle that Nandor Fodor is taking here is that I don't think that there is a ghost here. I don't think that there is a talking mongoose, but I think that there's something in the family psyche that is allowing them to manifest the idea of this mongoose, that maybe there was some sounds happening and it became a runaway event, right? That they all kind of shared this, I don't want to say hallucination, but shared the imagination of this thing.
I mean, imagination is a powerful thing. You know, that's how a lot of things are created, you know?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I could see that. I mean, and then on top, you put the layer of the atmosphere affects that as well. And then there you go.
Oh, 100%. And if you're, you know, and we'll get to this, the discussion of the daughter and growing up kind of in the middle of nowhere, truly remotely, and the family maybe being bored, there's a lot that plays into what he's after. So let's kind of dive into his process. He's interviewing the entire family about Gef. They themselves have never seen Gef. So we have another person investigating that hasn't seen Gef. And according to Alan Murdy, an author and ghost researcher, Fodor believed there was a Freudian psychological explanation for Gef rather than a ghostly one. Again, kind of like what we were just saying. But interestingly, Fodor had actually worked with Sigmund Freud previously. Freud saw many behaviors as manifestations of the subconscious. A lot of them were sexually motivated. Freud was kind of a freak in that way.
Oh, okay.
But like now that we've moved on decades from his studies, they've been foundational to a lot of things. They've been interruptive of a lot of things. I'm not well versed on that whole field, but they're taught pretty heavily, but they're not formally like, people are just like, yep, it's Freudian. Like his theories do not stand the test of time. They've been interesting, but they're not kind of like considered fact anymore, for what it's worth. But in this case, Fodor thought that Mr. Irving was expressing his perhaps other personality through this Gef entity. And another thought he had was that Gef was an apparition from the subconscious of the Irvings, whether it was the dad or somebody else. But eventually, after having never experienced Gef, Fodor gave up and left a goodbye letter behind, written specifically to Gef. And part of it says, quote, "I am very disappointed you did not speak to me. I believe you to be a very good and generous mongoose, and, quote, I brought you chocolate and biscuits."
I feel like it is a projection of his personality.
Mm-hmm. It's possible.
It's just it's just a character that they're applying to Gef, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So much thought. It's so vivid. It's such a huge thinker. I don't know. It's got to be a projection. I do like that theory.
I think it's really interesting. And it's part of what makes this case all the more interesting because it doesn't just say, nope, didn't happen, nothing happened, hoax, bye. Right? Like it offers a different angle to both think about the afterlife, or should I just say ghosts, or also like maybe motivations as to why certain people might see ghosts. But this is kind of where we step into the realm of theory. The idea here is simple. Like, is this a truth or is it a hoax? Is this fact or fiction or some combination in between of all these elements? Because maybe it started out as something very, very interesting and very unexplained, but then because of like interpretation or beliefs or what have you, maybe it then took on a life of its own. But I'm curious what you think, if this is kind of like a projection of the father's psyche or something, his other personality, so to speak, is it okay, or is it just absolutely terrible? And that's a leading question, that the family is just kind of feeding into it. You know what I mean?
I think it's terrible that the family's feeding into it, but it's family, man. People let family get away with a lot of stuff. People go with the flow when it comes to family. You know what I mean? They encourage family members, regardless if it's good or bad, just out of love, or just the basic principle of like, that is my, I'm related, flesh and blood.
Yeah. And maybe the truth is scarier than just like enabling.
And it's just like, it's really hard when it comes to family to draw the line. It really is.
Yeah. I mean, and have those conversations.
Mm-hmm.
Now, while it's easy to say, of course, at the top of this kind of theoretical discussion that the Irvings simply made up Gef the Talking Mongoose, many people do have claimed to see Gef, and they claim that the stories are true. In fact, I have a few photos here for you now. There are photos supposedly showing evidence of Gef's existence.
There's
3 of them.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Now, these photos themselves came from the Irvings, and to our knowledge, no other photos exist from a more neutral source, despite others seeing him.
It looked like a little fluffy dude.
A little fluffy dude.
I'm looking at the first photo here. He's like on a beam or something. I don't know.
Yeah, he's hanging out on a fence, actually, in all of these.
See? It's like on a... yeah, hold on. Was this just like a photo shoot?
Yeah. They're like, all right, Gef, smile.
This is all the same place?
The second 2 are definitely in the same spot, but like between 2 and 3, he moves, right? So he's sitting on like a wooden picket fence kind of deal. There's posts with 2 horizontal beams, one down low, one up high. The second photo has him sitting kind of tucked between the penultimate beam and the last beam. And then the last photo, the third photo, has him kind of walking around that beam to go further down the fence. And then the first photo is him kind of just squatting on the top rail of the fence further down it. So it looks, if you look at all the photos, it looks like it's moving along.
Yeah, it does.
But I can't help but notice the background is in perfect focus. But Gef the Talking Mongoose is avoiding the camera's focus for sure.
I feel it just feels like a photo shoot. Also, it doesn't feel like it feels like this is an actual real animal or creature that's there, as opposed to like, spectral. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. This is a afterlife. I'm like, that looks like it's, the opacity is at 100% here.
Right. Like that is physically present.
Nothing is transparent.
It's interesting. Like these are the only photos. I mean, there's many sketches that people have made online. You can go find those. But the Irvings themselves claim that Gef avoided cameras in particular. And so it's interesting that he would allow maybe these photos to be taken and then maybe never again. But either way, we have these photos. And it could be that they have a dead mongoose on their hands somehow. Maybe from their travels, maybe from a weird store down the road. I don't know what happens on the Isle of Man.
I didn't even think about that. What if it is a stuffed mongoose?
Yeah, like one of those badger hats.
Yeah, he does seem like a badger hat.
That third one, he does have his little head poked up, Okay, and the first one, it looks like he's squatting down. His head's centered up. The second one, it looks like he's positioned up and he's turned his head to his left and he's looking over at the camera.
Yep.
Then the third one looks like he's walking sideways from the perspective of the camera and he's got his head poked up, looking around. Like, I don't know, but it's also real like Wizard of Oz level of photo grain here.
It is.
And he's just out of focus.
Like I said, it does seem like the same pose. I didn't even think about it. Yeah, it does seem stuffed.
Now, coming back to the kind of theory, some believe that Gef the Talking Mongoose is a great example of a poltergeist. Poltergeists often play tricks on those that they haunt or dislike. It's kind of like an intelligent haunt, which we've talked about before, but these are more interactive-based hauntings. Instead of being in a place, hearing noises, kind of being deeply unsettled, feeling cold chills, etc., this is a type of haunt where it has an awareness of you, almost like it has a consciousness. So instead of being on this, we've talked about many different types of spirits and eyewitness accounts. Sometimes they're like the old videotape method where they kind of rinse and repeat the thing that they did in their life. And so they're just kind of on a track where they move the flowers from this table to that table and that's all they do. But then the intelligent kind is you call and it responds.
This is like the extreme of the intelligent end of the spectrum here.
Right. Again, especially with these like very corporeal photos.
That's full-blown personality, leaving voicemail type thing. Like this thing is it's just very advanced, very aware.
Now, despite the lack of evidence, what's interesting is that Vora has insisted that the story of Gef was very real, and she maintained this belief the rest of her life. But this is where I want to turn the story away from her father, James, and focus in more on her. Because again, the family experienced nothing for about 14 years. And by the time that she was 12 or 13-ish is when things started happening. And we also have some very interesting, additions to the story that I'll get to. But in a 1970 interview with Fate magazine, I want to quote the daughter herself. She said, quote, "It was not a hoax, and I wish it had never happened. If my mother and I had our way, we never would have told anybody about it. But Father was sort of wrapped up in it. It was such a wonderful phenomenon that he just had to tell people about it." And I feel like I would too, if I was experiencing something that I thought was real.
Yeah, I mean, if I thought it was real, I would want people to know. I'd also want like input.
But as always, when we talk about the idea of like a fake haunt, the air quote fake haunt or hoax, it's always worth discussing the motive, right? You don't have to have a motive to just want to get attention, but it does help kind of center the conversation. Why would the parents bother creating such a story if it wasn't real? And if she knew it was fake, why maintain the veracity of the story until the very end? And truthfully, there's not much to gain from a story like Gef the Talking Mongoose. I mean, they didn't sell any books. They didn't really do much. Like, people came and went and didn't see it. And as far as we can find, the Irvings never really made any money from their story. And of course, money isn't the only motivator, but their home was also difficult to sell. And if that was the case, because it was remote, because it was old, it had a lot of stories around it too, I don't think that this story of Gef the Talking Mongoose would help that. I feel like it would only hurt it.
Yeah. Maybe there's really bad entrepreneurs, you know?
They started a business and didn't know where to go with it.
Right. In all honesty, it's a skill set. So they could have like, okay, we got the attention, and they just didn't know how to capitalize or monetize it.
The house has since been torn down. I don't know, Christian, if we can like look up when that was, because it is worth noting there was at least another owner after them. And this is according to National Geographic. The second owner of the farm claimed to have at some point in time shot a strange creature on the farm. Now, was this Gef the Talking Mongoose? Was this the end of the supernatural entity known as the mongoose? We don't know. We wanted so badly to find further descriptions of this creature that the farmer shot, to find any photos or any evidence surrounding this, but it's just kind of something that's reported on textually only. So it's more hearsay, really.
Looks like the house was torn down in 1971.
Okay, so the house was kicking it for a while.
But then also, I guess, like, we could shoot this entity?
That's what it seems like. And so now it seems to cross the territory from, like, it saying, I'm a ghost, to this is a full-blown little cryptid guy.
Right.
We got a supernaturally intelligent mongoose that is, by this point, 80 plus years old, who can speak like 9+ languages, and hangs out in the walls of an old farmhouse on the Isle of Man.
Very elaborate.
Yeah. What's interesting is that James, in the end, had told a journalist from the St. Louis Dispatch in 1936 that Gef, quote, unfortunately does exist. He is a cross we have to bear, end quote, which was another biblical reference. I guess these are like turns of speak that people use, but again, I was like, in the few things that we do have from this family, there are a lot of Bible references. And so I was really curious if that played into their belief system here and what they were experiencing, but we don't really have much more on that. But again, this is where I wanted to kind of come back to Vora, the daughter, because others theorize that somehow she might have been the one behind all of it, all of Gef's antics. And maybe that's why she maintained the truth until the end. Maybe that's why she was a little upset that they let people know about it, because she was embarrassed to know the truth. And the fact that her father got all wrapped up in it is maybe why she continued on. But let's talk about it. The main reason for this is that Vora herself was at the center of most of Gef's activities. Though, per the discussion we had before, there's no known strife in the family, so there's no reason to fully believe that she would have a psychological cause to create Gef. This wasn't like a manifestation of deeper emotions or anything. So if she was the one behind it, it must have been motivated by something more like entertainment, or simply a prank. Again, this is a child growing up in a far-flung area on a small island that it itself is already remote. And so Price himself, we talked about earlier, he believed that Vora was a ventriloquist, someone that could throw their voice, so to speak, and speak without moving their mouth, making it appear that a voice was coming perhaps from in the walls or down the halls without herself looking like she was the one speaking, you know?
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. Cool skill set, and then used it to do something like that. But I like to think that if someone has that kind of ability, people would know about it, you know? To have that kind of skill set. Because that's something you'd be practicing for years and years.
Right. It doesn't just pop out of the woodwork. It's a kind of a difficult skill.
Yeah.
Unless your parents were in denial that it was you and they fully believed so firmly into this entity. But maybe it took on a life of its own because she was just having fun playing with it, building out new and different things for this entity to do. Maybe she was the one sneaking out, listening to the dad's chats and coming back and telling the mom. I don't know. What's interesting on that note is it's not just a theory. It has some substance to it because in 2001, a childhood friend of hers told Manx Radio, which is a station on the Isle of Man, that Vora was in fact a skilled ventriloquist. And so it wasn't until this century, like almost 70 years later, that a friend of hers called into the radio and said, yeah, she was a ventriloquist. She could have done that.
I mean, coming in late, so late.
Very late. Very late. But to further support this claim, Gef stopped talking once Vora left the home. So as soon as she moves out, the activity kind of stops. They don't hear anything. They don't see anything. They don't hear the talking. And I'm just like, if she is the center of this, it might have started as a goof for the parents and she kind of kept it going. But eventually they would have had to have known. And maybe they were just in too deep. They were like, well, honey, I went down to the pub and I told all my friends about a talking mongoose. Now I got to make something up. I got to get some paw prints and photographs. And they just double down.
I would think so because some of it's also messy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I can see there being a scramble. And then from there, it's like, okay, this is what we got. Let's just run with it.
Mm-hmm. Just hide the embarrassment, double down, here we go.
Yep.
So Harry Price, when he was kind of thinking about this theory, he pointed out that the house had many hollow walls that, quote, made the whole house one great speaking tube with walls like soundboards. By speaking into one of the many apertures in the panels, it should be possible to convey the voice to various parts of the house. And so maybe this is how she practiced ventriloquism. Maybe she would go to the walls, kind of whisper to her dad, or just growl into the floorboards or something. You know, the vents or what. I guess they don't have central AC, but like they do have like a hollowness. So you got to be able to speak into it. I guess he's talking about apertures. So maybe she's speaking into it, growling into it to kind of freak them out. They start to believe in it, and she starts practicing throwing her voice through the halls and through these walls. I don't know. But that is interesting. I've been in plenty of houses where you can hear somebody downstairs and it sounds like they're coming out of the wall because the vents are just connected in a way.
Oh, yeah. But I mean, I can see that inspiring the whole ventriloquism aspect of it. But it, does that really teach you how to do it? You know what I mean?
I don't know. I do think that there's something with the daughter here. I think that she is kind of at the center of it. If she's the one that's experiencing most of it, and as soon as she leaves, it all kind of stops. She's doing something, even if she's not like a ventriloquist, right?
I agree.
And so the main reasoning behind all of that is kind of what I was indicating. The theory is that maybe the family grew bored. They needed fun, like a story like Gef, to add fun to their lives. Maybe it started out as a child does. They goof with the parents. I know I certainly did that with walkie-talkies, trying to make it sound like, you know, I was in different rooms or whatever.
Yeah.
And so when you got hollow walls, you know, it's like the movie The Boy. Maybe you just start crawling around in there. You know, and start speaking to your parents.
Yeah, what a weird twist that was.
Yeah, weird. And then there's a second one. I won't even bother.
Oh, yeah. I never saw that one.
But ultimately, in many cases like this, there are claims that people behind the ghost are seeking money. But maybe in this case, they were simply being a normal family who were lonely, seeking attention, just trying to have fun, maybe pranking each other. And before anyone caught on, or maybe before the father caught on, the story leapt from the family into the community before he could go, oh, you were just goofing with me. Oh, whoops. Well, I can't walk this back now, so let's double down. And then it maybe just spiraled out from there. Nothing malicious, only kind of like goofs and gaffs, which is kind of why this whole thing feels more like a prank or feels more lighthearted than your traditional haunting, as it were.
I think I agree. I think maybe it just got out of hand, and then here we are. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And now they have a fun story to tell.
Yeah.
I guess. I don't know.
Wild story. And then that can also explain why they didn't monetize.
Yeah. But that is the story of Gef the Talking Mongoose. I don't know if there's any more appropriate animal that I would want haunting my walls, but a mongoose is pretty good.
It's a solid creative choice, I would say. And my question to the task force is, what animal would you say is haunting you? If you were like, okay, I got to I got an animal haunting me. What animal would that be?
We're taking spirit animal to a whole nother level.
Yeah, we are.
Like, do you got a hippopotamus clambering through your attic? Or do you got some sort of like panther hiding in the floorboards?
Yeah, good luck trying to explain hippopotamus. I'm a hippopotamus. You can't see it.
Blowing out holes in your ceiling.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know, there's some sort of aquatic creature up there stomping around. I don't know. This was a good kind of palate cleanser episode. I was kind of excited to talk about it.
I like palate cleanser episodes.
Yeah.
It's nice and refreshing because it gets so dark and just nefarious.
Yeah. I mean, even last week we had our 200 episode special. We went real philosophical with it, with the idea that information simply by knowing it can, quote, harm you, and harm takes many different forms. And so, yeah, this world is as wild and twisted, and all these mysteries are fascinating to me, but not all mysteries have to be spooky, scary. Don't turn the lights off. Mm-hmm. Sometimes, like, that's what I love about this story, is that it's lighthearted all the way through. If nothing else, a great story, which is, I think, at the end of the day, what The Unsolved is all about.
I agree. This is a fun one.
Well, any last thoughts before we close out?
Mine would be a great white shark.
Oh. Do you have a tank, or is it just flopping dry somewhere?
I think it's flopping dry. It's flopping dry. Watch out.
I feel like mine should just be a dog. You know, I've been putting off getting a dog, so if I could just have a ghost dog rolling, that'd be good.
Oh, no, you have ectoplasm all over. If he's not
I call him Ectopup.
Oh, Ectopup is cool.
Yeah, you know, I'll put up with the plasm. I'll put up with it. Well, thank you all again, Task Force, so much for another episode of Red Web. If you want to support us directly, you can do so at patreon.com/redweb. As I said, we also have merch at store.redwebpod.com. And if you've done all of that and you want to go above and beyond, we also have ways to review this podcast. It boosts us no matter where you listen to us. If it's YouTube, you hit the like. If it's Spotify, you can review us that 5 stars. Same on Apple or Google or wherever you listen to us. All of those help support us, help us find new eyeballs, and help us continue to do this show. But with that said, Fredo, I'll see you right back here next Monday for yet another mystery.